I ordered the DNA test at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep and the internet made it look fun. That's the embarrassing part. Not destiny. Not some deep search for identity. Just insomnia, a late-night discount code, and a vague curiosity about whether I was more Irish than I thought. When the kit arrived, I almost forgot to send it back. It sat on my desk for a week, next to coffee mugs and unopened mail. I finally spit in the tube before work one morning, sealed the box, and dropped it off without thinking twice. I expected a pie chart, maybe a distant cousin in Canada, something mildly interesting to bring up at dinner. I did not expect to match with a missing child. 6 weeks later, I got the notification. Your DNA results are ready. I opened the app while standing in line at a grocery store, one hand on a basket, the other scrolling. Ethnicity estimate first. Boring. Northern European, a little Eastern European, some things that made sense, some that didn't. I shrugged. Then I tapped DNA matches. At the top was a profile with a bright red banner I had never seen before. Close family investigative match. Below it, a name I didn't recognize and a message preview. If you are who we think you are, please respond. This is about a child who went missing in 2004. My first reaction was annoyance. I assumed it was a scam or some conspiracy hobbyist who thought DNA tests were government tracking devices. I almost closed the app. But then I saw the shared DNA percentage. 49.8%. That's not a distant cousin. That's parent, sibling, or child. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the edge of the cart to steady myself. I opened the message. It was long, careful, written by someone who sounded like they'd rewritten it 100 times. They said they were working with a private investigator and a nonprofit that helped families of missing children. They said my DNA profile was a near-perfect match to the biological parents of a little boy who vanished from a playground 20 years ago. They included a case number, a city, a date. They didn't say you are him. They said, there is a strong possibility you are genetically related to a child named Daniel Mercer, reported missing in May 2004. I stared at the name. Daniel. My name is Evan. I didn't remember ever being Daniel. I didn't remember anything before age 4, but I'd always assumed that was normal. I checked the birth date listed on my profile. It matched the age of the missing child almost exactly. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The grocery store noise faded into a distant hum. I opened a browser and searched the case number. Came up immediately. Local boy, 3, missing from park. Foul play suspected. There was a picture. A little boy with dark hair, wide eyes, and a dinosaur t-shirt. I stopped breathing. He looked like me. Not just vaguely. Not in the way kids sometimes resemble each other. He had my nose, my eyebrows, the slight tilt to one ear. My hands started shaking so badly I had to put my phone down in the cart. I walked out of the store without buying anything and sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel while my brain tried to reject what my eyes had already accepted. I told myself it was coincidence. Faces are similar. DNA services make mistakes. People get weird ideas. But I couldn't stop looking at the photo. The article said the boy had disappeared while his mother was distracted for less than a minute. No witnesses. No ransom. No body ever found. His parents had spent years searching. I whispered, "That's not me," out loud, in my car, to no one. But I wasn't convincing. I drove straight to my parents' house. They were in the kitchen when I walked in. Mom was cutting vegetables. Dad was at the table with his laptop. It was a normal Tuesday evening in every visible way. "Hey," Mom said, "you want to stay for dinner?" I didn't answer. I held up my phone and turned the screen toward them. "Who is this?" I asked. They both looked. Mom squinted first, then leaned closer. Dad stood up. I watched their faces change in real time. Confusion, recognition, fear. Real, raw fear. Mom's hand went to her mouth. The knife clattered onto the cutting board. Dad said my name like it was a warning. "Evan." "Who is this?" I repeated, my voice shaking. Mom started crying immediately. "No hesitación. No denial." Dad looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. "We always knew this day might come," he said quietly. My ears rang. "Answer me," I said. "Right now, before I lose my mind." Mom sank into a chair, covering her face. Dad took a slow breath. "His name was Daniel," he said. Is that me?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "Yes." The word hit harder than I expected. It didn't feel like information. It felt like a physical blow. I laughed, but it came out wrong. "Okay, great, cool. So I was a missing kid? You adopted me and just forgot to mention it." Dad's expression twisted. "We didn't adopt you." The room tilted. "What do you mean you didn't adopt me?" Mom looked up, tears streaking down her face. "We tried," she whispered. "We tried to make it legal later, but it was too dangerous." "Too dangerous?" I said. "For who?" "For you," Dad said. I wanted to scream. "Start talking. Now." They sat me down at the table like I was still a child who needed a serious talk. Dad spoke first. Slowly, carefully. 20 years ago, we didn't have kids. We'd been trying for years. Your mom had miscarriages. We were not in a good place." Mom nodded, crying silently. "One evening," he continued, "we were driving home from visiting your aunt in another state. We stopped at a park because your mom felt sick and needed air. It was getting dark. There weren't many people around. I already knew where this was going, and every part of me wanted it to be a lie. I heard crying," Mom said, her voice breaking, like terrified crying, not normal kid crying. Dad looked at me. We followed the sound. I felt cold all over. "You were behind the public restroom," Mom said. "Alone. Hiding."
Esther daher.
"That's not what the article said." Dad nodded. "I know, because your parents didn't know that part." My throat went dry. "You were filthy," Mom said. "Bruised. You flinched when we got close. You wouldn't talk. Just cried and said, 'Don't make me go back.' Over and over." My brain refused to process the words. Dad leaned forward. "We thought maybe you'd wandered off and were scared. We tried to take you to the front of the park to find your parents. But when we got near the playground," he stopped. "What?" I whispered. "I saw a man shouting," he said. "Angry, grabbing a woman by the arm. They were arguing about you. I heard him say, 'If he tells anyone, we're screwed.'" My skin crawled. Mom squeezed her eyes shut. "When he saw us with you, he started walking toward us fast. Not like a worried dad. Like someone who didn't want us there." Dad's jaw tightened. "You lost it. Started screaming, kicking. You tried to run away from him. You hid behind me. The kitchen felt too small, the air too thick." "So what?" I said hoarsely. "You decided to just take me?" Dad's voice shook. "We thought he was hurting you." "That's not proof," I snapped. "You could have called the police." "We did," Mom said. "From a gas station 5 miles away." I blinked. "What?" Dad nodded. "We panicked. We drove away with you because you were hysterical. We didn't want that man near you. At the gas station, we called the police anonymously and reported a disturbance at the park. We described the couple. I remembered flashes. Not clear memories, but feelings. Fear. Running. A smell like gasoline. Bright lights at night. We sat in the car for an hour," Mom said. "You fell asleep holding my hand. I felt like I was listening to a story about someone else." "Why didn't you take me to a hospital?" I asked. Dad swallowed. "Because when the police came back on the scanner, they said there was no sign of a disturbance. Just a mother reporting her son missing." Silence fell. "And you thought," I said slowly, "that the abusive man was my dad, and the scared woman was my mom?" "Yes," Mom whispered. "We thought they were lying." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "So you just kept me? You didn't go to the police after that? You didn't check if I had a family?" Dad stood too. "We did check. We watched the news. We saw the reports. But by then..." "By then what?" I shouted. "You were already calling us Mom and Dad," he said, tears in his eyes. You had night terrors. You screamed if we left the room. We were terrified that if we handed you over, you'd go back to that man. I shook my head, backing away. You don't get to decide that. We know that now, Mom sobbed. But back then we were scared and we loved you and we thought we were saving you. Saving me? From what? I grabbed my phone and pulled up the old articles again. I read deeper this time. There were follow-up pieces I'd missed. A neighbor had once reported frequent loud fights at Daniel Mercer's house. Child Services had visited twice but found no evidence of abuse. The father had a minor criminal record for assault years earlier. My legs felt weak. You could have been wrong, I said, my voice small now. You could have destroyed my real family. Dad nodded. We might have. The honesty hurt more than excuses would have. We hired a lawyer years later, he said. Tried to find a way to come forward without you being taken from us and thrown into the system. But the statute of limitations on kidnapping doesn't care about good intentions. So you just lived with it, I said. Let my parents think I was dead. Mom's face crumpled. I think about them every day. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my identity splitting down the middle. Evan, the life I knew. Daniel, the boy on the missing poster. Victim? Kidnapped child? Or rescued kid who got stolen twice? The next day, I replied to the DNA message. I told them the truth, that I believed I might be Daniel, that my parents. Within hours, my phone rang. The woman on the line introduced herself as a liaison for the Mercer family. They've been waiting 20 years, she said gently. I met them a week later. My biological mother looked older than she should have, like grief had carved years into her face. My biological father looked like a man who hadn't forgiven himself for something he couldn't control. When they saw me, they both started crying in a way that made my chest ache. My mom, my first mom, touched my face like she was afraid I'd disappear. You have my eyes, she whispered. I didn't know how to exist in that moment. I felt like a ghost at my own funeral, watching people mourn a version of me that had never really died. We talked for hours. They told me about my childhood, about the park, about how my dad had turned his back for a second to grab juice from a cooler. How when they looked back, I was gone. They never mentioned abuse. But when I gently asked about the neighbor reports, about the fights, my dad looked ashamed. We fought, he admitted. A lot. Money. Stress. But we never hurt you. I believed he believed that. I also knew fear can live in a house even without bruises. I told them my parents' story. Every ugly, complicated piece. I expected rage. Instead, my mom just cried harder. I would have searched forever, she said. But if you were scared, if you thought we couldn't protect you. She couldn't finish. My two sets of parents met a month later. It was one of the most surreal days of my life. The people who raised me and the people who made me sitting across from each other, bound together by one small boy who had grown into me. There were no punches, no screaming, just grief and guilt on all sides. In the end, the truth settled into something none of us liked, but all of us had to accept. I was taken, but not for money, not out of cruelty. I was taken because two broken adults thought they were saving a scared child from something worse. And two other broken adults lost their son because they didn't see how scared he really was. There was no clean villain, no simple hero, just a moment in a park where everything went wrong. I kept my name, Evan, but I added Daniel as a middle name. I have two mothers now, two fathers, for people who love me in flawed, human ways. Sometimes I still look at that old missing poster. The boy in the dinosaur shirt feels like someone I used to be in another lifetime. But he's not missing anymore. He grew up, and now he knows the truth.